The quiet town of Derry, New Hampshire, was forever changed in 1990 when a shocking murder occurred. On the surface, Pamela Smart had everything: a loving husband, named Greg Smart, a promising career, and an idyllic life. But beneath this perfect image, a dark and dangerous love affair was brewing. Pamela's relationship with a 15-year-old student, Billy Flynn, would lead to a chilling crime that captivated the nation and raised important questions about manipulation, obsession, and the power of influence. This is the story of how Pamela Smart, in the grip of an illicit affair, orchestrated the murder of her husband, Greg Smart, forever altering the course of her life and leaving a lasting impact on the American public. In the early 1990s, Pamela Smart appeared to have everything a young woman could wish for. At 22 years old, she worked as a media coordinator at Winnacunnet High School in Hampton, New Hampshire. She was admired for her skills and outgoing personality. Pamela had recently married 24-year-old Greg Smart, an insurance salesman. From the outside, their life together seemed perfect. They lived in Derry, a quiet town known for its peaceful atmosphere, and were well-liked in the community. Greg, who was hard-working and easygoing, adored his wife and was proud of her career. Their marriage seemed solid, with Greg always supporting Pamela's ambitions. They appeared to be living the dream life, with a bright future ahead. However, despite the perfect image, Pamela began to feel dissatisfied. She started craving more excitement and passion, feeling bored by the routine of her daily life. Though her marriage to Greg was stable, it lacked the thrill and excitement she had hoped for. Pamela wanted something more, a life filled with adventure and passion, something that her marriage couldn't provide. Greg, focused on building a stable future, didn't share the same desire for change. This growing restlessness inside Pamela would soon lead her down a dangerous path that would completely change her life. But at this point, everything seemed perfect. Her marriage to Greg, her career, and her life in Derry all painted a picture of happiness. Pamela Smart's longing for excitement and a change from her routine life began to take shape in the most unexpected of places: her workplace. As a media coordinator at Winnacunnet High School, Pamela interacted with students daily, offering guidance and support in her role. Among the students she worked with was 15-year-old Billy Flynn. Billy was a quiet, troubled teenager who had recently started attending the school. He came from a difficult background and struggled with personal issues, including feelings of isolation and a lack of direction. While Pamela had always been friendly and kind to him, it was not long before Billy began to develop feelings for her. At first, Pamela paid little attention to Billy's growing infatuation, as she was still focused on her marriage to Greg. However, something about Billy's attention gave Pamela the validation and excitement she had been craving. Billy, eager to find a connection with someone who seemed to understand him, became increasingly drawn to Pamela. He admired her beauty and the way she carried herself, confident, professional, and seemingly in control of her life. For Billy, Pamela was the kind of woman he felt could provide him with the affection and attention he had been missing. Over time, this admiration turned into a full-blown infatuation. Pamela, too, began to notice the young teenager's attention. His admiration made her feel desired and important in a way she had not felt in her marriage. She started to engage with Billy more, exchanging friendly conversations that slowly turned more personal. They would talk about their lives, their dreams, and their frustrations. For Pamela, these conversations were a form of escape from her increasingly dissatisfying marriage. Billy, on the other hand, found himself falling deeper in love with her. What started as innocent flirtation soon became something more dangerous. Pamela and Billy began exchanging personal details about their lives. Pamela confided in Billy about her marriage problems, expressing how she felt disconnected from Greg. She revealed that she was seeking excitement and passion in her life, something she felt was missing. This gave Billy the sense that he was special, someone who could offer Pamela the attention she needed. As their relationship developed, Pamela began to feed into Billy's feelings, playing on his emotions and making him feel important. What started as an emotional connection soon evolved into physical attraction. Pamela, seeking to escape the monotony of her life, gave in to the growing desire for something more. One evening, after spending time together, they crossed a boundary. Pamela and Billy shared a kiss. That kiss marked the beginning of an affair that would spiral out of control. It was an act that was both thrilling and forbidden, fueling their emotional connection. For Pamela, it was an escape from her life, while for Billy, it was the fulfillment of a fantasy that seemed too good to be true. As the affair continued, Pamela began to secretly meet with Billy outside of school, away from the watchful eyes of the town and their community. The secrecy of their relationship added to the excitement, and both felt exhilarated by the thrill of their hidden bond. What started as a simple escape from her dissatisfaction quickly became an obsession for both of them. Billy, deeply infatuated with Pamela, believed their connection was destined to be something greater. Pamela, meanwhile, began to see Billy not just as a student but as someone who could give her the passion and adventure she had longed for. However, this dangerous relationship was quickly heading down a path of no return, one that would eventually lead to devastating consequences. As their affair grew deeper, so did their plans. The tension between their desire for each other and the consequences of their actions would soon push them to make decisions that no one, least of all Greg, could have ever imagined. As Pamela Smart's affair with 15-year-old Billy Flynn grew more intense, so did the emotional and psychological pressure she felt in her life. Her dissatisfaction with her marriage to Greg reached a breaking point, and the affair began to feel like more than just an escape. It became her obsession. But as the relationship between Pamela and Billy deepened, so did the complications. The secret romance was thrilling, but it was also fraught with danger. Pamela knew that their affair, if discovered, would ruin everything she had worked for: the marriage, her career, and the image of a perfect life she had carefully cultivated. Yet, as Pamela's relationship with Billy became more intense, she began to reveal more of her frustrations and desires. She confided in Billy about her struggles with Greg, describing their marriage as emotionally distant. Pamela spoke about her longing for something more, something exciting, something that would break the constraints of her quiet, suburban life. She told Billy she felt trapped, unfulfilled, and desperate for change. Billy, young and impressionable, became consumed with the idea of helping Pamela escape her problems. He believed their bond was something special, that their love was real, and that it was only a matter of time before they would be together. But Billy's infatuation with Pamela went beyond mere attraction. It began to develop into an obsession. He became increasingly jealous and possessive of her, feeling that he was the only one who truly understood her. Pamela, on the other hand, started to grow frustrated with her inability to break free from Greg. Although she had manipulated Billy emotionally, she realized that Billy was too young and inexperienced to help her solve the one problem that held her back: her marriage. She needed to eliminate Greg from the picture entirely, and the idea of murder, though unthinkable to many, began to seem like the only way out. Pamela didn't initially approach the idea of killing Greg directly. Instead, she began to plant the seeds of the idea in Billy's mind. She spoke about how much she wanted to escape her marriage, about how she felt trapped by Greg's devotion to her. She began to talk about how much better her life would be if she were free. Free to be with Billy and pursue the life of passion and excitement she craved. Billy, infatuated with Pamela and desperate to be the man who could give her what she wanted, began to entertain the idea of murder. He was convinced that this was the only way to keep Pamela in his life and to prove his love for her. At 15, Billy lacked the maturity to fully understand the consequences of his actions. He was easily influenced by Pamela, who had skillfully played on his emotions and manipulated his feelings. Over time, the talks of escaping Greg turned into whispers of what if and how could it be done. Pamela slowly pushed Billy to take action, framing it as the only way to guarantee their future together. Eventually, Billy agreed to kill Greg, though he was hesitant at first. The lines between love, obsession, and murder became increasingly blurred, and the idea that they could have the life Pamela dreamed of seemed within their grasp. But Pamela's manipulation didn't end with Billy. She enlisted the help of two other boys, Patrick and Sean, both of whom were friends of Billy. At first, they were skeptical, but Pamela, using her charm and persuasive powers, managed to convince them to join in on the plot. Pamela made them believe that the murder was necessary for her to be happy, and that they would be helping her break free from a suffocating life. The plan, as it was formed, was chilling in its simplicity. Pamela would be the one to create the perfect opportunity. On the night of the murder, She would call Greg and ask him to meet her at their house after work, claiming she needed to talk. Meanwhile, Billy, Patrick, and Sean would be waiting nearby, ready to carry out the deed. Pamela continued to manipulate Billy, reassuring him that once Greg was gone, she would be free, and they could be together. Billy, believing he was acting out of love for Pamela, became more and more determined to see the plan through. He even began practicing with a gun, making sure he could carry out the murder without hesitation. As the date of the planned murder drew closer, Pamela's excitement grew. She had convinced herself that this was the only way to move forward with her life, to escape the emotional prison she had created for herself. She justified the crime in her mind, telling herself that she wasn't responsible for Greg's death. It was Billy and the other boys who would be carrying out the murder. On May 1, 1990, everything was set in motion. The plan was in place, and the murder of Greg Smart seemed inevitable. The careful orchestration of Pamela's manipulation, combined with Billy's obsession and the involvement of Patrick and Sean, set the stage for a tragic and brutal crime that would forever alter the lives of everyone involved. As the night of the murder approached, the excitement and fear of what was about to happen mixed in Pamela's mind. She had manipulated the situation so expertly that it seemed to her that the only obstacle left was getting rid of Greg. Little did she know that the consequences of her actions would soon spiral out of control, leading to a shocking and devastating outcome that no one could have predicted. On May 1, 1990, Greg Smart came home after a regular day at work, unaware that his life would soon be brutally cut short. He had received a phone call from his wife, Pamela, asking him to come home for a conversation. They had been distant lately, and Greg felt their marriage was beginning to fall apart. Despite his concerns, he agreed to come home and talk things through. But Pamela was not interested in fixing their marriage. Instead, she had already set her deadly plan into motion. Her affair with 15-year-old Billy Flynn had escalated, and she had become convinced that the only way to be with him was to eliminate Greg from the picture. Pamela had carefully manipulated Billy, planting the idea in his mind that they could only be together if Greg was out of the way. Billy, infatuated with Pamela, agreed to carry out the plan. Billy, along with his friends Patrick and Sean, was waiting nearby, ready to execute the murder. Pamela had made sure everything was set. She had instructed Billy and the others to wait for the right moment, when Greg would arrive home, and she would lead him into the trap. Pamela knew that Greg would never suspect that his wife, the woman he loved, was behind the plot to end his life. When Greg arrived home, Pamela greeted him warmly, pretending everything was normal. She led him to their bedroom, under the guise of needing to talk about their troubled relationship. But as they entered the room, the tension in the air was palpable. Behind the scenes, Billy and the other boys were in position, waiting for Pamela's signal. It was at that moment, when Greg was distracted, that Billy and his friends snuck into the house. Billy had been preparing for this moment for days. He was nervous but determined. He had practiced with a gun, convincing himself that this was the only way to prove his love to Pamela. As Pamela led Greg into the living room, Billy and the others quietly moved through the house, getting ready to strike. Pamela continued to keep Greg distracted, pretending to talk about their marriage while she knew that the murder was about to take place. Billy, Patrick, and Sean, armed and ready, were closing in on their target. At the signal, Billy moved into the room, gun in hand. He raised it, his hands trembling, and shot Greg. The sound of the gunshot was deafening, and Greg fell to the floor, wounded but still conscious. Billy hesitated for a moment, but then, fueled by his obsession with Pamela, he fired again. This time, the shot was fatal. Greg's body fell limp as life left him. Pamela, standing by and watching, felt an eerie calm wash over her. She had convinced herself that this was the only way to be with Billy, and now that it was done, she felt relieved, yet strangely hollow. Once Greg was dead, the boys quickly fled the scene, making sure to cover their tracks. They disposed of the weapon and wiped down any evidence they could find. Pamela, however, remained behind, pretending to be a grieving wife. She immediately called 911, sobbing and telling the operator that someone had broken into their home and killed her husband. She put on a convincing act, hoping the authorities would believe her story. When the police arrived, Pamela was a mess of tears, telling them how her husband had been murdered in their home. She played the role of the shocked and heartbroken wife to perfection. The police, seeing her distress, initially believed her account of events. But as they began their investigation, inconsistencies began to emerge in her story. The detectives soon discovered that Pamela had been having an affair with Billy, and suspicion started to grow. The investigation dug deeper, and it wasn't long before they learned that Billy, Patrick, and Sean had been involved in the plot to kill Greg. The police uncovered evidence linking the boys to the crime, and the truth began to unfold. As the investigation progressed, Pamela's involvement became undeniable. The perfect life she had carefully built, her marriage, her affair, and her image as a loving wife, was crumbling. The murder was not a random act of violence, as Pamela had tried to make it appear, but the result of a carefully planned scheme driven by obsession, manipulation, and betrayal. Pamela's life, once seemingly perfect, fell apart. She had manipulated Billy and the other boys into committing murder to satisfy her own desires. She had orchestrated the death of her husband, and now the truth was coming to light. The investigation would eventually expose the shocking reality that the woman who had been trusted as a loving wife and mother had masterminded the death of the man she had promised to love. The consequences of her actions would shatter not only her life but also the lives of those around her. Despite Pamela's best efforts to cover her tracks, the investigation into Greg's murder quickly grew more complicated. As police began investigating, they discovered inconsistencies in Pamela's story. They became suspicious when they learned about her affair with Billy, and Pamela's behavior raised red flags. She seemed almost too calm in the face of such a tragedy, and her story about not knowing anything about the murder didn't add up. Billy's friends, who had helped carry out the murder, soon began to feel the weight of their actions. Vance Lattime Jr. was the first to crack, realizing the severity of the crime and how deeply involved Pamela had been. Fearing that he would be caught, he confessed to the police, implicating Pamela in the murder plot. Vance's confession led the police to Billy, who eventually admitted to his role in the murder. The police then set up a sting operation, recording a conversation between Pamela and Billy. In the tapes, Pamela was heard discussing how she had manipulated Billy into killing her husband and how she had intended to get away with it. The evidence was damning, and it became clear that Pamela Smart was not the innocent widow she had claimed to be. Pamela Smart was arrested and charged with being an accomplice to first-degree murder. Her trial was one of the first to be broadcast on live television, capturing the public's attention. The case was sensationalized by the media, as it involved a married woman, an affair with a teenager, and a brutal murder. The public was captivated by the drama of the trial, and Pamela became a household name. During the trial, the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of Pamela's involvement. Billy Flynn testified against her, recounting how she had manipulated him and his friends into carrying out the murder. The prosecution painted a picture of Pamela as a cold, calculating woman who had used her sexual power and emotional influence to orchestrate the killing of her husband. Pamela's defense team, on the other hand, argued that she had been the victim of a false accusation. They claimed that Billy and his friends acted independently and that Pamela was not responsible for the murder. But the jury was unconvinced, and after weeks of testimony, Pamela was convicted of being an accomplice to first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Pamela Smart's conviction did little to silence the media frenzy surrounding her case. She became a symbol of manipulation and obsession, a woman who used her charms to orchestrate a murder. Her story was a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked desire and the consequences of emotional manipulation. Pamela has spent the years since her conviction appealing her sentence and maintaining her innocence. Despite the evidence against her, she has consistently argued that she was wrongfully convicted. Meanwhile, Billy Flynn and his accomplices received lesser sentences due to their cooperation with the investigation. Billy, in particular, was sentenced to 40 years in prison but was released in 2015 after serving less than half of his sentence. The Pamela Smart case remains one of the most notorious true crime stories in America. It raised important questions about the power of manipulation, the influence of an affair gone wrong, and the length some people will go to in order to get what they want. To this day, Pamela Smart's case is remembered as one of the most chilling examples of love turned toxic, and it continues to captivate audiences and spark debates about justice and morality. Share your thoughts on this shocking case in the comments below. We'd love to hear your opinions and perspectives on the events that unfolded.